I think I may just get started then in the first instance. I think we've got our attendees joining me call, and being conscious of time, being respectful of time, let's just begin. Thank you everyone for joining this presentation today, this webinar. My name is Zachary Tan, and I'm currently a research fellow at the University of Melbourne and the Centre of eResearch Australia. This workshop, which is an introduction to AI in healthcare from data to algorithm and real-world solution, is the first of many. Supported by the Medical Research Fund, Medical Research Future Fund, and a MRFF AI grant, which we have recently received. These workshops are intended to connect the diverse skills of clinicians and technologists to be able to work together, develop and build AI solutions for real-world healthcare challenges. I think too often we find that these two groups are very siloed and don't communicate with each other, whereas the intention of these workshops to form a bridge such that we can all work together and build improved solutions for healthcare. For today's workshop, as an introduction, we are hoping to answer these key questions. Firstly, what does AI actually meaningfully mean in healthcare? How can clinicians use these tools in practice? And fundamentally, I have a great idea and some data. How do I use this together to build my application? Now, today we're very fortunate to have two absolute sort of subject matter experts and internationally recognized leaders in this field. To begin with, we have Professor Paul Bonnington, who is the director of the Monash and Monash eResearch Centre, who will share with us some of his success and case studies. And his presentation will be followed by Professor Mingguang, who will speak to AI in ophthalmology from algorithm to solution and then product. We will conclude today with a panel discussion for 15 minutes. And for all attendees who have any questions, please write those questions in the chat box, in a Zoom chat box, and I'll chair the discussion and ensure that your questions get asked. But that's enough for me to begin with. I'm going to hand over the reins to Professor Bonnington, and Professor Bonnington, you should be able to have control now to share your screen.
Great, thank you very much, Zachary. It's my pleasure to do this presentation. So I'm just going to have an attempt to share my screen. Just bear with me for a moment. I've just on a new computer and it's now just asking me to. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to just jump out and jump back into this webinar. My computer is actually refusing to share my screen. I'm very sorry about that. But if I can just quit out of Zoom and then back in, I'll be just 2 minutes. Oh, 2 seconds. Hope that's okay.
No worries. No, not at all. I think despite having a team of technical experts, we encounter problems with Zoom sort of regularly. I think that's just part and parcel of this new strange world that we live in. I also have us on the call who's joined us, Professor Mingguang, who has just joined us as well, and will be presenting his case study towards the second half of this webinar. So as we wait for Professor Bonnington, we've got a comment from Andy Chen who says, when you tell someone you're a computer scientist and ask you to fix your printer, I think that's an experience which many of us share or resonates with the panelists here.
Okay, I'm back now. You're going to have to assign me host duties again. Okay, I think we're all okay. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay, excellent. So Thank you very much, Zachary, for that introduction. It's my pleasure to present to you today. So I'm Paul Bonnington. I'm the director of the Monash eResearch Centre. It's a role that I've had now for 13 years. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a story about a journey that we've gone on as an eResearch Centre. We started working in this space of the intersection between technology and healthcare approximately 13 years ago. And so some of the case studies I'm going to present to you actually predate really what we think of as the latest generation of AI capabilities. But I think it's a really important journey to go on, because what I'm going to try and show you is that there are a number of pieces that need to come together to support the use of AI in healthcare. And as an eResearch Centre, we've grown significantly over that 13 years, and we've started to address really some of this underpinning infrastructure and systems and processes and data governance matters, which are all part of this consideration that one must have when you're thinking about the use of AI in healthcare. So some of the challenges we face in AI in healthcare is, well, medical imaging in particular is producing huge amounts of big data. We're riding the exponential curve of data in terms of what we're producing. The amount of data that we've collected at a Monash eResearch Centre has been growing at a compounding rate of 75% per year. We're up to around 25 petabytes of data that we're responsible for. And a lot of this is actually, or more than half of this is coming out of the medical and health fields. The instruments themselves are actually getting better all the time, and they're producing more data, inhuman quantities of data. This is why AI is important, because AI really is that inhuman tool that we have that can actually let us deal with the data deluge. The other challenge we face is actually getting access to high quality person-based data from agencies such as healthcare providers. We have to recognise that in order for AI to work, you need to be able to train it with the very best data. That data is actually going to be the data that's sitting in these agencies and health services. And so we need to establish these trust relationships with these agencies in order to be able to get access to the data in order to drive the AI machine learning. And then finally, I'm going to share some insights we've had around unstructured data. Much of that human data is actually unstructured. And I'm going to give you an example of where we're now applying use of AI, not just to imaging data, but also to case notes. And so this is really the journey that we've been on. Now, the eResearch Centre has actually been, it's been one where we're building these 21st century microscopes. If you think about a microscope, you can view it in really three parts. It's got a light source down the bottom, it's got analysis filters in the middle and focusing knobs, and then it's got a viewfinder at the top. And in a way, you can think of what we're doing in the eResearch space as building a seamless orchestration of things coming together to perform those three roles. Down the bottom here, you've got scientific instruments are playing the role of the light source. You've got research cloud and high performance computing that's performing the role of the filters. It allows you to focus that data by doing data processing. And then the insights coming through from the modern day lens. Now, the computer screen is the modern day lens because everything is digital. And essentially, it's the way that we view the rest of this infrastructure and capabilities. So our journey with the eResearch Centre has been to build these over and over again. And, you know, over the 13 years, we've essentially brought together these capabilities to drive a workflow or a research pipeline that actually stitches together scientific instruments, high performance computing, research cloud, data storage, and then the computer screen and where the researcher engages. I'm going to give you a few examples of where we've applied this methodology in the big data challenges. But firstly, I'm going to do so without actually referring to any use of AI, just to show you that, you know, the methodologies have existed for some time, AI now becomes an important tool or Lego block that we substitute in to build these pipelines. Here is an example of dealing with big data. This is in neuroscience space, and here I am in what was at the time the world's largest hybrid 2D, 3D visualization facility, the Cave 2 at Monash University. And this is what we call comparative visualization. We had tractography data from MRI scans that came from a cohort of patients involved in the study of Huntington's disease. And there were some controls, there were some pre-symptomatic patients, and there were some post-symptomatic patients. And this is tractography data. This is the wiring of the brain. And you can get it actually in a very, very fine resolution. But there's so much data there. You can imagine essentially you've got these clusters of bundles of fibers, nerve fibers, that are represented on the computer screen here. They're juxtaposing this with other similar data sets actually does lead to insight. In fact, this is an example of where visualization helps you with the unknown unknowns. These are things that you can't necessarily tell a computer to find because you actually don't know they exist. But with this type of comparative visualization, we are able to spot patterns that occur. You can sort the brains instantly with a click of a button, and they rearrange themselves, and they could be sorted by age of the patient, or it could be the onset of disease, or it could be the post-symptomatics versus the pre-symptomatics, or it could be the control group. They're all just rearranged. You scan across very quickly and you see something often that you've never seen before, because the human brain is actually a really good AI engine. It's very good at pattern recognition, believe it or not. But here's an example essentially where we're using the technology to drive new insights and discoveries, but it's not what I would call AI at this stage. But you can see how this works not only in the case of looking at histology, the tractography data, but it can also be used, of course, for histology images. And I'm sure if any of you have used these types of scanners or microscopes, you know that there's a huge amount of detail there. Being able to view really all 80 million pixels of an image like this actually, again, accelerates the process, accelerates the discoveries, it accelerates what potentially could be the treatments. So that's an example really of how we've done this. We've put these as parts of Lego. This visualization is one of the Lego blocks that we apply building these pipelines. Now, over time, these pipelines use more and more Lego blocks. Now, in the middle here, probably really what I'm referring to here, you've got a whole lot of technologies that come together to build these pipelines. But at the center of all of this is data. Data is king. Data is actually where it all begins. And this is where the AI journey begins. And so our focus as an eResearch Centre over the past decade is how do we increase accessibility to that? What are the technologies that are going to disrupt how we deal with data? And then what is the infrastructure and things you've got to line up to make it work, to build your pipelines? So that has led to what we do within an eResearch Centre to be divided into projects. And you can think of these loosely as being coupled around, you know, the middle part of the microscope, or the beginning part of the microscope, or the top of the microscope. I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about the middle piece, high performance computing, and the research cloud. So we very early on in our journey of the eResearch Centre focused on data processing. We saw, because of the inhuman quantity of data, we needed high-end, high-performance computing to do data processing to help us focus that data. And so that led us to establishing what is called MASSIVE. It's a nice name for a big computer. It is massive, but MASSIVE is actually an acronym. It actually stood for, at the time, the multi-scale Australian Sciences Imaging and Visualization Environment, because it really did service and support a community that were very focused on working using visualization. what is it today? Well, it's gone through many iterations. It's now a consortium involving a number of partners, and obviously number of projects. In any one year we're dealing with. This year it's been up to about 900 projects and about 1,000 simultaneous users. But it's evolved actually in an interesting way. It actually became a very GPU-focused machine. GPUs turned out to be, this is again predating work we've been doing in deep learning, but it predates really, it's actually what was needed to deal with the data deluge for that middle layer of the microscope. And so consequently, it's got a rich GPU-focused capability, and that serviced at the time communities such as neuroscience, cryo-electron microscopy, and bioinformatics. Now it's actually been turning its attention to supporting machine learning and AI. But just to give you a sample of what it did look like, you can see that we coupled it very closely with high-end instruments, particularly the Australian synchrotron, and then high-end medical imaging capabilities. And that was why we called it an integrative HPC facility, because it was so integrated with the data producing instruments. And it started to take on a flavor where it was doing this in real time. And if you think about it, when you use a microscope, the researcher interacts with that microscope in real time and is actually wanting to turn the knobs of the microscope and try things out. So here is another excellent example in healthcare where this led to a groundbreaking discovery. This is Andreas Furus, who was using the Australian synchrotron, and he was actually generating high-end phase contrast imaging, and I'm going to try and play this video, phase contrast X-ray imaging of lungs. And this was the first time that, and I hope this is coming through nice and smoothly, but this was the first time that very highly detailed X-ray imaging in 4 dimensions was captured. These are breathing lungs. It was made possible through the use of massive, tightly coupled with phase contrast X-ray imaging at the Australian synchrotron, and it led to this world first. Now, instantly, this actually had an application, and it had an application in the health sector, and I'm now going to move back my slides. It actually led to a discovery because we identified through this process that your very first breath of your life is the most important. This was a technique that could see damage in lungs before it was showing up on a regular X-ray or any other medical imaging at the time. The damage was actually being caused in a way which manifested firstly through the way the lungs moved. And that's hence why 4 dimensions turns out to be crucial to this. The way the lungs move actually does reveal damage. And through this, they determined that the way that we were ventilating premature babies was incorrect. And it led to a change in that protocol of ventilation of premature babies. And that obviously has obvious healthcare implications. There's obviously examples that don't go directly to healthcare, but to life sciences, making groundbreaking discoveries when you couple all of these things together in real time and you can see things for the first time. Now, I want to move on to really what started our journey of dealing with sensitive data. Now, this is a major study which was actually the largest project funded by the NIH in the US. And it's money that came to Australia to do a clinical trial in the use of aspirin in the elderly. This clinical trial, in actually dealing with sensitive information, patient human-based information, led us to actually develop infrastructure and capabilities that allowed us to share that in appropriate ways, and led to, for example, the fully accredited safe haven environment for dealing with sensitive data. And so that brings me to today. This is where the eResearch Centre is today. It has a certain scale about it, and we deal with really a number, up to thousands of projects. But the two trends that we're seeing today as an eResearch centre is AI and data science is driving the main technique that's pushing us further forward, and data privacy is another big aspect. And this, to some degree, this started with the GDPR. So our capability as an eResearch centre now looks something like this. We've got underpinning infrastructure and high-performance computing and our software instruments, but now we've got increasingly this idea of data sharing environments that deal with sensitive research data. So I just want to unpick a little bit more about what we're doing in that space and where we're going with it. It's more of these local Lego blocks. There's a need to develop a strategic approach in order to capitalise on technologies that we've recently deployed. And I'm going to talk to you about two of those: the Secure eResearch Platform and CogStack, which is doing AI for free text or natural language processing. We're developing up really how this fits in with our larger ecosystem of capabilities at Monash. And this is now underpinning the trust relationships that I alluded to. Data and now trust coming together has been a major enabler of partnerships with industry and healthcare. I'll flick through, obviously, GPUs have been big for us. NVIDIA, we have a partnership with NVIDIA. They have purpose-built AI machine learning engines, which we deploy at scale now. And they've been applied now to dealing with our partnerships with the sensitive data. Here's one example. Zongyang has been instrumental in this partnership with molemap, and we're using it to train AI engines to detect melanomas. Working with single lesion images, which have been fully annotated by dermatologists. And this is leading to better tools that support the GP clinics, for example, and able to determine and detect melanoma better than the GP and approaching that of a dermatologist. We've then partnered with what is a major secure data linkage capability coming out of the UK called the Secure eResearch Platform, and are deploying that here within Australia. This supports the sharing of that sensitive data, and to do so at scale. The UK context of this system, there's already 500 data sharing partners involved here, and it was driven by the health sector within Wales in the original case. So we've deployed that here at Monash, and we're now using that to build out data which is high-powered, safe and secure. Now, what's another piece of this? Another Lego block is we're dealing in the hospital context with so much unstructured data. And if you look at it here, if we've got all of these databases, but a huge part of what's been produced now in the human context is actually largely unstructured, and it's actually largely hidden from the electronic medical records. So if we really want to tap into all of the data, we need to start dealing with unstructured data. And this leads to another initiative with our UK colleagues at King's College around the use of CogStack. And in a way, it's an information retrieval and extraction platform, but it's like Google, your own private Google inside the enterprise or inside the hospital. And this is actually being used to great effect in hospital partners with King's College. They've applied it to 250 diagnostic results, which were not structured, but unstructured, and they were able to make discoveries simply by doing Google-like searches on this, and having clinicians have the power of Google, but in the clinical context has been a game changer. And this is where we're going now. In fact, another related MRFF proposal that we've been involved in involving Monash partners is looking to push out the use of CogStack inside the health provider. This is a way of getting access to reports from using the AI techniques of natural language processing, getting access to reports without sharing the sensitive information. But sometimes there has to be some data that's sent over that's going to be obviously necessary to be dealt with using a secure platform, and that is pushed into the secure eResearch platform. And so this is where it's all coming together. It's happening now here within Australia, and there are projects in place now to make this a reality. All of this is coming together to really drive what I believe is now the approach to take AI in healthcare to the next level. I do recognise I've given you an introduction to my world. My world is very much about what are the underpinning capabilities that enable you, the practitioners and the clinicians and the researchers, actually get access to capabilities that enable you to make the discoveries you're seeking to do. So I hope that's been useful for you. Very happy to take questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation, Professor Bonnington, and certainly fascinating to learn about the evolution and the history of AI from the fundamental technical infrastructure to many of the emerging clinical applications that you described. And what a wonderful centre at Monash. Before I sort of introduce our next speaker, just a reminder to the audience as well that please, we do have a Q&A session, a panel discussion towards the end of this presentation. So if you have any questions, please make sure to submit them through the Zoom Q&A function. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Professor Mingguang He. Professor He is a global expert in vision-related clinical and epidemiological research, and was the first principal investigator of the first real-world study that deployed AI for diabetic retinopathy screening in clinical settings globally. Professor He today is going to share with us his experience deploying AI from data to solution to product.
Thank you so much, Zach. So I'm not sure if you ever go through the ideas of MRFF AI in health workshop. So maybe it's good for me to really, before I get into my presentation, I just briefly share with our audience the ideas of the AI in health workshop. So actually, in the middle of this year, we received a great announcement. So we become one of the 5 winners of the they call it most competitive, but then it's also most important AI artificial intelligence grant in Australia. They call it Medical Research Future Fund AI in Health. So the idea of this AI in Health project is not just to develop the very advanced AI and to translate and transform the way we practice medicine, in particular in the context of ophthalmology, but also to create a platform that we can really to foster the future workforce, kind of by create a platform that allow clinicians to meet with the AI expert. Because I myself is an ophthalmologist, so in our practice, we got so many data. Everybody got data, but we try to create something like either for publication purpose or somebody wanted to translate our, to make the most of our data and then translate this into a product and then hopefully initiate a startup company and then become maybe IPO in the future. This is a great plan. But then we need to have some kind of proper or good marriage, become AI expert and our clinicians. So that's why today, and then this AI in health workshop is, we hope we're able to create this kind of platform. So at the moment, because of COVID, all the workshop is going to be online, but then later on we will try to do a hybrid, can be a very nice on-site workshop, like 1 hour or 1.5 hours that we offer everybody a good drink and snack, and also to create a face-to-face interaction opportunity. Okay, good. So then today, what I'm going to share with you is just take ophthalmology or our work as an example. I try to bring you through our journey in terms of how to collect data, how to build an algorithm, and then how to translate this algorithm into a solution and possibly a product. So my name is Ming He. I work for Center of Research Australia and also Melbourne unit as a professor of Ophthalmic Epidemiology. Before my lecture, I actually disclose we hold a couple of patents on AI, artificial intelligence in ophthalmology, and I'm on the directorship for Eyetelligence as a startup company that is also one of the applicants actually for this MRFF AI grant. And then also I'm very grateful for Professor Bonnington and also Dr. Zhong Yang, who are they are Monash eResearch Center. They are also a joint applicants for this MRFF AI in health grant. So then deep learning and computer vision is very fascinating. So it starts from a very simple classification on dark or non-dark. This is simple classification on the image, or it can be a real-time object detection. You differentiate, oh, this is a doggy, and this is a cat, and this is a book. This is a image or object detections from the video. And then the self-driving vehicle, Teslas become very hot. And then this actually is quite demanding because it will require a real-time classification on the object and also translate this to a autopilot program. So ophthalmology is very fascinating. Actually, with one of the specialists, subspecialty, let's say, like very hard to get in Australia, but then actually, but it's very highly dependent on imaging. So this is slit lamp photo. You can see the anterior chamber and the lens, and also this is on the slit lamp. You can see the cornea got opaque. This is like an infection, and then also you can see the fundus of the eye. If this is OCT scan that you can see historically from neuron sensory layer all the way to RPE and choroid and so on. But then this is a full color fundus photo, visual field data, and also MRI. So ophthalmology is highly depends on imaging. So this is a typical cases in our day-to-day clinical practice. Diabetic retinopathy, very common, 30% in diabetic patient, and age-related macular degeneration, 10% among those 17 years and older, glaucoma, 2 to 3% among the elderly population, and the ROP is for the premature baby, very common. But then the key challenge is how to differentiate or to have an early detection for all these eye diseases, because in the early phase of the disease, the patient often without any asymptomatic, they won't show up automatically in your clinic. You really need to have an active screening to detect and identify them. So deep learning has become a very hot topic since 2006, 16, and you can see this is a couple of top journal published papers on, like, this is one of the paper we involved publishing JAMA. Not this one. This one is from the JAMA in 2017, and there's a dermatology classification published in Nature. Another one using transfer learning, actually combine lung imaging and also the eye imaging, OCT imaging, to publish in Cell. So all this become a very hot topic. A lot of submission to top journal, but also to our specialty journal as well. So our work actually start from 5 years ago. So we start from collecting data. We actually create a platform. We call it crowdsourcing platform for fundus image. We specifically working on the full color fundus photo. And what we do is we actually collect images from 25 eye hospital in China. We collect 200,000 images from 200,000 patients. And then we cannot use, use both EMR labeling. When I say EMR labeling, we actually use the clinical data to label all this image, but then we also use subjective label. We invite 31 trained specialists to label this image. We managed to label 30,000 of images, and then we consider a label is conclusive or is correct if 3 consistent grading outcome is achieved. So then we start to publish the accuracy of the algorithm on differentiating diabetic retinopathy in diabetic care. And then in this particular work, actually, we use around 60,000 images in the training set. But then we also complete the internal validation on around 8,000 images. We prove the AUC is very good. But then more importantly, we actually prove the the algorithm is generalizable. It's not just good at a Chinese population, it's also performed equally well in indigenous Australian and Malay and also Caucasian eye funders. So actually you can see the accuracy in the indigenous Australia is not as good as what we observe in the Chinese population and Malay and Caucasian, probably because of the special pigment on the funders. And then we also work on the glaucoma classification, another tons of work like label on this training set. We involve around 30,000 images of patients, and then we prove that the accuracy can be very good, 0.98, 0.986. But then similarly for AMD, in particular late wet AMD classification, because late wet AMD is those AMD that can be potentially treatable. So we similarly, we use a similar level of number of images for training, and also we validate and prove the accuracy is actually pretty good. So a lot of people think deep learning is a black box. So we're not sure by what this artificial intelligence create this classification outcome. So there's a very simple method, but this work actually done 3-4 years ago. At that time, still very miserable. I mean, not very fascinating area in this AI research. So we proved that actually the AI based on very the features that are very similar to our clinical practice to make this final classification on eye diseases. And then at that time, going back to like 3-4 years ago, nobody really believed AI classification is able to make an accurate, we won't call diagnosis, but classification. So what we did is actually we built a website so that allow any clinicians to upload their image, and then we have immediately couple seconds and classification and show up on the website. So people start to believe, oh, this AI classification is really possible. So this classification is not just on eye diseases, but also on biological age, HB1AC, and stroke risk as well. Then we did something similar for OCT. If you upload OCT from this website, we demonstrate this AI is able to classify for macular edema, Jusen, and CME, and then also give you a heat map to show the regions with the best differentiating power. So then we start to consider translate this product into this algorithm into a product. So we first of all, we design online funders image management system, and we call it AI assisted reading center. So I don't go to the detail, but this is I want to bring your attention is that we develop a product, but then the product is being used by a nationwide DR screening network program in China. This program actually, they screen about 140,000 people annually all over China. This is China, the map. And then they set up 2 reading centers, one in Beijing, another one in Guangzhou. But then the challenge is they really overwhelmed by the number of images coming to the reading center. Because if you talk about 10 people, they can't really handle so many images. Then we start to use AI as a triaging system. So actually, because at that time, the AI algorithm is not regulatory approved. So what we did is we use AI to triage the image into super normal, because there's 4 images per person. If they're all normal, we consider they're super normal. We send the AI report directly to the patient. But then otherwise, if there's any quality issue, if it's not consistent with the super normal criteria, then we go to manual grading. Then I'm going to show you what happened. So this is a typical day, typical week in a screening site. So give this like June 22nd as an example. One day they screen 180 people. So you can, very hard to grade all these 180 patients' images. So we use AI actually create opportunity that significantly reduce the burden on the manual grading. You see a lot of images being classified by AI, because in this DR screening section, actually majority of the diabetic patient they're normal in the diabetic retinopathy grading. So AI help a lot in terms of improve the efficiency. And then in Australia, we develop a point of care offline solution. This is very important because we we try to deploy this in the indigenous remote area. They don't often have a very reliable internet connection. So we make this CNN or neural network very light. It can be run on a normal CPU, I mean a very normal laptop. So that we connect the fundus camera with our small laptop, a conventional laptop. It doesn't require a GPU facility and a printer. So whatever image taken, and it will be automatically transferred to the laptop, and then the classification report become available and print it out. It just take 2 to 3 minutes to complete the whole process. And in Australia, there's another challenge in the optometry service. So this is one of the typical case study. This is a very top optometrist. So she kind of telling us that it's getting harder and harder for me as an optometrist to do everything in a short space of time. It can be overwhelming. The work can be overwhelming, but I do not want to mix anything. So what we did is actually we did a software as a solution, as a software solution. Again, it's offline. We connect this SaaS AI system to the fundus camera, and then it's fully automatic. It doesn't require optometrists to do any additional manipulation. Whatever image you take, we'll generate the AI report to you. So it really helped to standardize the practice in the optometry setting, and also help them see more patients without fall. So this is another example on our development, because when we run the clinical trial, we found out that actually in some of the setting, in particular the GP and endocrinology setting, to have a technician in the endocrinology clinic to be responsible for taking image in particular is very it's very luxury, because this person is just not available. So what we do is we create a completely do it yourself by the patient system, completely do it yourself. It doesn't require technician to operate on the fundus camera, because the fundus camera is fully automatic. And then we also connect this with a lot of special sensor, put it around, and so the whole system can be the DIY, do it yourself by the patient, and it completed in 1 minute without requiring specially trained technician and clinicians. So then, when we deploy the AI system in the real world, a lot of people complain your AI is only able to make a classification on 3 diseases only. But then how about if there's other disease, will we mix the disease? So we actually develop a new algorithm based on memory network. So it's not just looking at 3 diseases. We can actually make a diagnosis for 18 diagnosis, eye condition, and a lot of 60 typical type of lesion. So this is one of the example. This is fluorescing for FFA, this full color fundus photo. Actually, the AI is able to perfectly tell you what is the disease and what are the lesions on this particular image, and tell you 3 questions: what type of images mortality it is, and what are the disease condition, and what are the lesions in picture and memory. So in summary, this AI is getting very hot, a lot of publication, a lot of product coming up for the market. And then for ophthalmology, this is the key diseases. And then people are creating more innovative idea, new generation of AI, but then deployment in the real world setting is challenging. All this work is supported by a lot of research grant, and actually we are work closely with Monash eResearch Center for a lot of this AI development, and also a couple of industry partners as well. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor He, for sharing that wonderful presentation. And of course, I've had to be privileged over the last couple of months to work with you and see the technology in action. One of the questions that we have received now, sort of the next stage of this webinar is our panel discussion. To the audience, please, if you do have any questions, please type it in the Q&A box. But our first question to begin with is, and I think this may be directed to Professor He, but also Professor Bonnington, that in relation to the on-device AI, this was built with the thought of having people use it in the field. Were there any sacrifices in terms of performance in order to achieve better speed during runtime?
should I start answer the question, or I think Zhongyuan is the best to answer this question, but then I try to answer in my perspective first. So I think in most of the time, if you make the network lighter, of course it will sacrifice the accuracy. But then it's always a trade-off in terms of we call it field pragmatic feasibility and then the accuracy. And a lot of when we assess the accuracy of AI, actually we have to consider or assess the accuracy in the context of comparing with the current practice or we call it current practitioner. So we say AI will make mistake, but then human being also make mistake. As a doctor, as an optometrist, as a junior doctor, we all make mistake. So AI will somehow standardize the way we practice. And then again, it's a trade-off because in some of the area, uploading images is just impossible.
All right, then I'll start next. So very interesting question. So Professor mentioned those days, most AI models, they're deep learning based. Of course, there's a very active and hot research topic called neural network quantization or model compression. Its ultimate goal is to compress the model from 500, 600 megabytes to less than 2 megabytes, a very, very tiny model. Then this tiny model consumes less power, less computational resources, and can be deployed on the edge computing devices. So normally we're talking about you squeeze the model 100 times, but you only lose, let's say, less than 1% of the AUC or accuracy. But most companies I've seen those days in the industry, as long as it's not in the regional area completely without internet access, if you do have internet access, then locally speaking, you don't need to have a high-end machine to run the algorithm. Everything can be deployed in the online cloud computing service. Like eResearch has its own massive MeRC service, and AWS from Amazon, Azure from Microsoft. Those will be the easiest way to deploy large model, but without, as long as you have local internet access.
Cool. This next question is probably more so for Professor Bonnington as well as Zhongyuan. The question is, are you aware of any emerging clinical applications using NLP conversational agents or chatbots?
Yes. So the simple answer is yes. It's obviously in the triage context, and I think I can't really give you the actual projects that we're involved in. They're still very much in development work, but this notion of using the chatbot as a triage is actually a very exciting area.
Yeah, my answer is similar to Professor Paul Bonnington. Yes, and I can tell you there's projects under development in Monash in my group is to develop open-ended question chatbots for answering medical relevant questions. But there actually we have considered multiple models, human intervened, hybrid model, completely automatic. They are targeting for different purpose. But for triage, yes, I think completely automatic solution would be possible.
I probably can point to one of the other big domain areas that one of the big applications is probably in psychology and psychiatry. The answering those questions that probably deal with some of the questions that would normally be asked by a psychiatrist. Those are obviously being able to be used to great effect in an anonymous context, which is often where people want to access a service like that.
Wonderful. Thank you for those answers. The next question is from Mohammed, focused on eye diseases like myopia, and Professor He, of course, is a myopia expert. Have you seen, Professor He, and to the rest of the panel, any applications where AI may have an application within myopia care?
The answer is absolutely yes. A lot of people trying to use AI as a tool to work out different things that cannot be easily done by human or optometrists. for example, a lot of people use data to kind of use data or clinic or reflection data to try to predict which kids likely to be progressive myopia and which one tend to be stable in terms of progression. And then our group also working on using retinal fundus photo to classify or differentiate myopia maculopathy. And also we are working on a project using a retina photo to differentiate progressive and stable myopia.
Wonderful. And the next question, which is probably a question for everyone, and is certainly a very topical question, is how does one balance the relationship between AI and a doctor? And certainly the whole purpose of these workshops are to bring together the technologists as well as the clinicians. Foreseeably, will the AI still be jobs of the doctors one day? And in fact, are they able to collaborate in harmony? Be great for your perspectives.
Yeah, I might kick off. No, AI is not going to replace the doctor. The most effective use of AI is when there's a human in the loop. And in a way, the way that doctors and GPs in particular should approach this is it just is an additional tool to add to their toolbox that they have available to them. At the end of the day, when you're talking about medical governance and so on, there's going to be a human that needs to sign at the bottom of the the form. Then someone has to be there has to be a human in the loop. There's no doubt about it. But just having and opening up these tools to all medical professionals is just going to greatly enrich the quality of care. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, in my understanding, AI will help professional or eye professional or any professional to do their job better rather than compete with them for the job. I'll just give you an example. When we run this one of the AI project, one of the project is we call it qualitative research. We're actually asking ophthalmologists, optometrists, GP, and endocrinologists, do they like the AI solution? Actually, optometrists, they are the one disliked AI solution the most because they think as optometrists, we are providing primary eye care and also reflection service. This is most likely be replaced by AI. But actually, when we really deploy the AI as a way to standardize their care, they really love AI as a product to help standardize their work, their diagnosis, and also improve the efficiency. Basically, they help them see more patients eventually.
So from the technology perspective, I think the most of the medical AI is doing in the area is currently the front end, which is diagnosis, right? I mean, doctor has, clinicians has other important roles, for example, intervention, treatment, surgery. That's the area currently AI is not doing well. And in the foresee 30, 50 years, I don't think AI is going to completely dominate those areas. But one thing is that for some simple jobs, I mean, we have been doing some work in neurology, maybe some cardiologists reading those signals lines and some radiologists, low-end radiologists, they might actually have the risk of losing their jobs, but doesn't mean they're losing their jobs completely. They can spend more time doing research and on the treatment side, right? So I would say that there's a way they can live in harmony, but I don't think one or the other is going to dominate the other area completely.
Fantastic. Thank you for those responses. Our next question is, speaking as a computer science student, how would I or how should I get domain knowledge regarding medical procedures and data? And how well versed as a computer scientist do I need to be in this domain?
Yeah, probably I can try to answer this question. Yeah, because actually, in terms of any successful AI project, a harmony or a good collaboration between AI expert and clinicians is really the key for the success. Because as a computer science researcher or computer science expert, they don't really understand the needs. I mean, in this clinical practice. Just for example, when we develop AI algorithm, computer science, we think, oh, should we make these diagnoses as accurate as possible. And then we should aim to diagnosis for every single eye diseases. But then if you talk to the clinicians, they will tell you, oh, actually what we need is because we already have a good surgeon to do all this cataract surgery. We don't need your AI. We don't need your robot. Because we don't want to lose our job. But then what we need is if you can use your AI, screen the community, find the patient for me who can, the cataract patient for me to operate on, that will become very helpful. Because at the moment, no eye professional wanted to do any of this screening. They don't want to waste their time. They just sitting there in their clinic, wait for the patient to come in. So that's, I think that's one of the example how, the importance to work with clinicians to really understand the challenge and the question and try to solve the problem with the technology.
Probably the comment I'll make probably is a more general observation. I think as a computer science student, I think it's better for you to develop your problem-solving skills and your ability to engage. And in order to get the domain knowledge, you'll never have it completely. It will be something that you will be developing every time you engage with a new problem in a new community. And so it's developing those skills to understand quickly, to get up to speed with really what is the essence of a problem. That's far more valuable than really trying to understand all of the context around it. You've got to have an ability to discern really what to center in on very quickly. And that's a skill. It's one that will take practice, but you're going to be surrounded by people who have the domain knowledge. It's really just being able to develop a technique which enhances how they think about approaching and solving those problems.
Interesting. I just see another question pop up in the Q&A windows from the other side of the table. So how can junior doctors get involved with and learn accurate information about AI in its future? So sorry, Zach, I'm taking your role reading out those questions.
Please.
Yeah. So I've been working with lots of clinicians, right? Most of my team members, they are computer science trained students, PhD students, and research fellows. But what I found really interesting is while we are working on some joint projects together, it's much actually easier for doctors and clinicians to learn our AI stuff rather than the other way around. Because to get an MD training, it's 3 years, 5 years, it's a long time. But all the cutting edge AI and knowledge actually can be quickly grabbed in, let's say, 6-12 months of time. So I think as a junior doctor, if you think future the medical AI application will be a mainstream, lots of data science going to be involved. You can get started with learning those medical AI courses. There are numerous of them online. And for more practical, then you can get in touch with your university collaborator who is actually working in the technical side, have some joint grants applied together. So that would be the best way to learn some knowledge.
I think, Zach, you would be the perfect person to answer this question. You are a junior doctor, and you know how to do AI, and you're so fascinating by the AI technology.
And Karen, thank you for that question. Karen, in fact, is one of my friends, and I swear I did not plant that question. It's a very good question. I think the short answer is I think the best way to learn is to do, and a lot of these papers, there's an extraordinary tsunami of new AI papers in medicine being published constantly. I think one of the first things, I think one of the most useful things that I did was actually to sit down one day, read one of these papers, highlight what I didn't know, which was mostly paper, and then go away and actually go look it up. Because I think there's this entirely almost new set of vocabulary and terms that one has to learn if you don't come from a non-technical background. Now, I would agree with Dong-Yan's sort of sentiment that I think by no means is that insurmountable, but it just takes a bit of time. And I think, sort of developing that vocabulary and that fluency around the technical infrastructure, I think is a really important first step. And then as Professor He and sort of Dong-Yan said, I think just reaching out to people as well. You'll be surprised at the number of groups who are working on these type of things now around Australia. Now, we've got sort of one final question from Effendi, and I think being conscious of everyone's time, this will be our final question. Effendi's sort of question is, what do we think of the regulatory framework surrounding AI? And who is to blame if AI fails to diagnose disease and that results in negligence?
I'll just make a comment, a general one again. It's a work in progress. The frameworks, this is a disruptive technology. Every disruption in society, actually, the regulatory framework will take time to catch up. There will be things that will happen that are unanticipated, and the frameworks will adjust to deal with that. But we're dealing in an age of disruption, so that's the the reality of the situation. I think it comes back to the human in the loop, though. I think we have to view AI as a tool, and that it's a tool that a human, like a doctor, can choose to listen to or not. And so I think human in the loop is key to this.
And also in terms of, because medicine is highly regulatory, being very sensitive, regulatory sensitive. So, but American people is far advanced to our, to Australia. They like, for example, for FDA, they have a 510K de novo special pathway for AI product. But I think TG is working hard on this and try to make this available. But then sooner or later that will happen.
Yeah, my extra comment, sooner or later you will see lots of dispute between should we blame the technical provider or the doctors who signed the signature, if the fails come through. Yeah. So maybe Zhongyan, you can set up an insurance and making sure if any AI make a mistake, then you have some identity compensation for it. Right. Maybe for the insurance company perspective, there will be a new product design on top of that. I mean, for all the technologies, emerging technologies, normal technology comes first, then of course there will be issues and problems being exposed after being largely deployed into the market, right? Then of course, different departments, healthcare departments, insurance, adjudicate, they all gonna work through this, around this all together to move this forward. So that's something always that we cannot avoid. Yeah, but we shouldn't be panicked.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. Certainly for to all the attendees for attending this session, our first workshop of hopefully many, and of course, most importantly, to our panelists as well for sharing their deep and sort of expert insight into this really emerging area. This session has been recorded, so if anyone would like a recording, we will sort of have that available through the Eventbrite for your review later on. This is my email address as well. So if anyone has any questions or feedback about these workshops and how we may be able to improve them in the new year, please reach out and I'll be delighted to speak further. But thank you again for your time. And I look forward to seeing you at the next workshop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Zhongyan. Thank you so
Zach.
much.
Thank you, Thank you, Paul.